If you've ever loved someone so deeply that you started quietly editing your own life just to protect theirs, then you'll probably understand how a story like this can unfold. It's a story someone shared with me not long ago, and the more I listened to it, the more I realized how easily something like this could happen to anyone. The man in the story is named Michael, and his wife is Emily. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but he truly believed it was strong. They met at a time in life when things felt simpler. Emily had a natural warmth about her that made people feel comfortable almost instantly. She was the kind of person who would compliment a stranger in a queue or remember someone's birthday without needing reminders. It wasn't grand gestures that made Michael fall for her. It was the small things. Her kindness. The way she made people feel like they mattered. When they got married, Michael said he didn't feel like he had won something. He felt lucky, truly grateful. To him, Emily wasn't just his wife, she was the person he felt most at home with. But from the very beginning of their marriage, there was always one complicated part of Emily's life. Her family. Not in a dramatic, obvious way. There were no loud arguments or shocking confrontations. Instead, it was something quieter, something that always seemed to linger in the background. Michael noticed small things over time. Whenever Emily's mother called, her shoulders would tense slightly. When her brother sent a message, she would grow quiet for a moment before replying. And whenever Michael tried to ask about them, the conversation would usually end with the same phrases. It's complicated. You wouldn't understand. It's not your problem. At first, Michael didn't push. Like most people in a relationship, he wanted to respect her boundaries. He believed that when someone is ready to talk about difficult things, they will do it in their own time. And he told himself what many people tell themselves. Every family has its issues. But then one evening, something changed. Michael told me that Emily walked into the kitchen looking like someone who had been holding her breath for hours. Her eyes were red, but dry, like she had already cried earlier and forced herself to stop. She didn't ask about his day. She didn't make tea like she usually did. She simply said his name. Michael. He said there was something in her voice that made his stomach tighten immediately. So he turned off the stove and asked her what was wrong. Emily stood there for a moment, looking down at the floor, almost as if she was deciding whether to say what was on her mind. Then she looked up and said something that instantly changed the mood in the room. "I need you to promise me something," she said. "Before I tell you." Michael admitted he laughed a little at first, mostly out of confusion. "Why?" he asked. "What is it?" Emily stepped closer and lowered her voice. "It's about my family," she said. "And it can't go any further than this room. Not to your friends. Not to your parents. Not to anyone." Michael told me he tightened his grip around the mug he was holding without even realizing it. He asked her carefully, "What exactly are we talking about?" But Emily shook her head. "Just promise me first," she said. "Please." When Michael described this moment, he said it's difficult for people to understand what goes through your mind in a situation like that. You're not thinking about consequences. You're looking at the person you married, the person you promised to stand beside, and you can see they're scared. And when someone you love is scared, your first instinct isn't to question them. It's to support them. So he promised. He told her, "Okay, I promise. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." For a brief second, Emily looked relieved. But that relief didn't last long. She sat down at the kitchen table slowly, pressing her hands flat against the surface as if she needed something to steady herself. Then she began explaining the first part. What she told him was about her family, exactly like she had said. A situation that had been quietly building for years. Something serious enough that if it ever became public, it would completely change the way people looked at them. It wasn't ordinary family tension. It explained why Emily always became tense when her mother called. Why certain subjects made her uncomfortable. Why she seemed so careful about what people knew. Michael said that while she was talking, his mind kept trying to soften what he was hearing. When you love someone, you naturally want the world to stay simple. Good people, bad choices, problems that can easily be fixed. But life isn't always that simple. When Emily finished explaining the first part, she looked at him carefully, almost as if she was waiting for his reaction. Waiting to see if he would judge her. Waiting to hear him say he couldn't be involved in something like that. Instead, Michael asked her a simple question. "Are you safe?" Emily nodded. But according to Michael, her eyes told a slightly different story. Then she took a deep breath and said something that immediately made him realize the conversation wasn't over. "There's something else too." And when Michael told me this part of the story, he paused for a moment. Because sometimes something else isn't just another detail. Sometimes it's another secret. And second secrets are usually the ones that destroy marriages. Michael told me that night didn't end when the conversation stopped. The truth is, it followed him to bed. He said he didn't sleep properly after that. Not because Emily had shared some piece of gossip or a scandal you could casually whisper about with friends. This was different. He described it as the kind of information that settles deep in your chest and quietly changes the way you see everything around you. The fridge humming in the kitchen. The streetlight shining through the curtains. Emily's breathing beside him. Everything looked normal. But he said he knew he wasn't the same person he had been just a few hours earlier. The next morning, Emily acted almost too normal. Michael said it felt like she was trying to convince herself everything was fine. She made breakfast like it was any other day. She asked if he wanted brown sauce with his eggs. She talked about work, about small things that normally filled their mornings. But every time their eyes met, there was a brief pause. A quiet understanding. As Michael described it to me, it felt like both of them were silently acknowledging the same thing. We're in this now. That weekend, the something else Emily had mentioned finally came out. And strangely enough, it started with her phone. Michael was very clear about one thing when he told me this part. He wasn't snooping. He wasn't checking her messages or trying to catch her out. They were simply sitting on the sofa, half watching television, when her phone started buzzing. Once. Then again. Then again. Each time, Emily glanced at the screen quickly. And every time she did, Michael noticed her expression tighten, just slightly. She swiped away the notifications almost immediately, as if the motion itself could erase whatever problem was appearing on that screen. After the third buzz, he asked gently, "Everything all right?" Emily did something people often do when they need a few extra seconds to think. She stood up, picked up 2 empty mugs that didn't actually need picking up, carried them to the kitchen, then came back and sat down as if nothing had happened. "Yeah," she said quickly, "just family stuff." But according to Michael, it didn't feel like just family stuff anymore. Because the next time the phone buzzed, Emily didn't look irritated. She looked frightened. That's when he reached for the remote and lowered the volume on the TV. "Talk to me," he said. Michael told me that Emily did try. At least, he believes she did. But the conversation began with the kinds of sentences that almost guarantee trouble. First she said, "Promise you won't be angry." Which, as Michael put it, is usually the sentence that prepares you to feel anger you didn't even know you had. Then she added, "It's not what you think." Which, of course, immediately makes your mind imagine the worst possible explanation. And then she finally said it. She had been helping her family financially. Not occasionally. Not the kind of help where you cover a bill or lend someone a little money for a few weeks. Michael explained that it was serious money. Quiet transfers. Loans taken out in her name. Credit she had never mentioned. According to Emily, it had started before they got married. She believed she had it under control at the time. But over time, things changed. A request for help slowly turned into expectation. Expectation became pressure. And eventually, she felt trapped. She believed that if she stopped helping them, the family secret she had already told Michael about might come out into the open. While telling me this, Michael said something suddenly clicked in his mind. He realized why Emily had never wanted a joint bank account. At the time, he had respected that decision. She had explained it by saying she preferred financial independence. That keeping things separate helped avoid arguments. Michael even admired that mindset. But now he saw it differently. It hadn't been about avoiding arguments. It had been about avoiding the truth. When he asked her how much money was involved, she hesitated before answering. And the number she eventually gave him made the entire room feel unsteady. Not because they were poor. Michael explained that financially they were doing reasonably well. But the problem wasn't the amount alone. The problem was that it wasn't just her life being affected anymore. It was their life. Their plans. The holidays they kept postponing. The conversations they had about maybe starting a family next year. All of that suddenly looked different. And then Emily said something that Michael told me he still thinks about. She said quietly, "I didn't tell you because you're good. You would have tried to fix it, and that would have made it worse." Michael paused when he told me that part. Because to him, it sounded like something strange. Almost like his decency had become something she needed to work around. Instead of shouting or arguing, he simply said, "So you lied." Emily's eyes filled with tears almost immediately. "I didn't mean to lie," she said. "I was trying to protect you." Michael admitted something to me at this point that many people might not expect. He didn't walk away. He didn't shout. He didn't pack a bag or give some dramatic speech about respect and trust. He stayed. Because she was his wife. Because she was crying. Because he had made a promise. And because part of him still believed that the woman he had fallen in love with, the kind, thoughtful Emily he knew, was the real version of her. He convinced himself that this situation was just pressure, family complications, and bad decisions. So without even saying it out loud, Michael made a decision in his mind. He told himself, "I'll steady things. I'll help fix this. We'll get through it, and then we'll reset." So he looked at Emily and said something simple. "All right, from now on, we deal with it together." According to him, she looked relieved in a way he had never seen before. She grabbed his hand tightly and whispered, "Thank you." And that, Michael said, was how everything really started. Not with betrayal. Not with shouting. Not with some obvious moment where everything fell apart. It started with loyalty. It started with him choosing to become her shield. And the difficult thing about being someone's shield, Michael told me, is that you rarely notice how much damage you're absorbing. Michael told me that after that conversation, Their marriage didn't fall apart overnight. Instead, it changed. He described it as their relationship quietly turning into an operation. From the outside, everything looked perfectly normal. In fact, he said most people probably thought they were doing better than ever. They still attended weddings together and smiled for photos. They still did the small routines couples do, asking each other if they needed anything from the supermarket, sending quick messages during the day, posting the occasional picture online. If you had asked anyone who knew them, they likely would have described them as a stable couple, mature, comfortable with each other. But inside their home, things had become very different. Michael said everything started to feel measured. They developed new rules, though they never actually called them rules. Certain conversations were avoided late at night when they were tired. Some phone calls from Emily's family were taken in another room. Certain names were only mentioned when the kettle was boiling, as if the noise could hide the tension. And money became something else entirely. Michael described it as if money had turned into a third person living in their house. Always present, always watching. He began tracking their expenses more carefully than before. Not because he wanted to control Emily, and not because he didn't trust her completely, but because he was trying to prevent surprises. After what she had told him, the last thing he wanted was another hidden problem appearing out of nowhere. Emily had promised transparency, and to Michael's credit, he believed she did try, at least at the beginning. She would show him certain messages. She would tell him when she had handled something involving her family. But over time he noticed that word, handled could mean many different things. Sometimes it meant the issue had been solved. Sometimes it meant it had only been delayed. Michael said he often found himself asking the same question. Is that it now? Are we done with this? And Emily would usually answer, yes, I think so. Those last two words started to bother him more than anything else. I think. He said that phrase slowly became something he dreaded hearing. Still, he kept the secret. All of it. He kept it when his mother casually mentioned that Emily seemed stressed lately. Michael simply shrugged and said work was probably busy. He kept it when his friends joked about how expensive married life could be. He laughed along, even though he knew the financial strain in their home wasn't something anyone else understood. He kept it when people asked why they hadn't taken a bigger holiday in a while, or why they weren't talking about starting a family yet, or why they seemed to be taking their time. And he kept the secret even when Emily's family visited their home. Michael said that was the hardest part. They would sit at his table, drink tea, eat biscuits, and call him son, as if they were a close, supportive family. But he knew something they didn't acknowledge. Behind all those polite conversations was an invisible debt, an invisible tension, a story he had promised never to tell. And he said that sometimes the audacity of it all made his head spin. Still, he tolerated it. Because he loved Emily. And because, on some days, she was exactly the woman he had fallen in love with. Michael said she could still be incredibly thoughtful when she wanted to be. There were evenings when she would bring home his favorite snack for no reason at all. Nights when she would rub his shoulders after a long day. Moments when she would rest her head on his chest and say quietly, "You're my safe place." And during those moments, Michael said he allowed himself to believe things were improving. Maybe the worst part was behind them. Maybe loyalty really would pay off. Maybe this was simply what marriage required sometimes. Two people carrying each other through difficult periods. But then something happened. Michael described it as the moment things became public. Not fully public, but public enough to change how he saw everything. It started with a work event Emily had been talking about for weeks. A formal company gathering with drinks, speeches, and colleagues bringing their partners. Emily was excited about it. She kept saying it might help her professionally, that it could open doors for a promotion. Michael was proud of her. He even took the day off work so they wouldn't feel rushed getting ready. That evening, he said Emily looked incredible. He told me that standing next to her, he felt a genuine sense of pride. Despite everything they had been through, they were still showing up together. At the venue, Emily introduced him to everyone with a bright smile. "This is my husband." She held onto his arm tightly as she said it, almost as if she was making sure he stayed close. At first the evening felt completely normal. There was small talk, casual jokes. Someone asked Michael what he did for a living. Another colleague told Emily she was lucky to have a husband who supported her career. Michael laughed politely and joined the conversations. For a while, he even felt himself relax. But then he started noticing something. Emily kept disappearing. Not to the bathroom, not to get drinks. She would simply drift toward quieter corners of the room, glance at her phone, and then return looking slightly tense. Michael leaned toward her at one point and asked quietly, "Are you all right?" She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Just work stuff," she said. Later that evening, during a conversation with a group of her colleagues and their partners, something unexpected happened. Someone made a light joke about how expensive everything had become lately. Michael responded casually, simply trying to join the conversation. "Tell me about it," he said with a smile. "It never ends." That's when Emily laughed. But according to Michael, it wasn't the kind of laugh you share privately with someone you love. It was sharper, louder, the kind that draws attention. She turned to one of her colleagues and said, loudly enough for several people nearby to hear. He wouldn't know, honestly. I'm the one who handles everything. If I left him in charge, we'd probably be living in a box. Michael said. The conversation paused for a moment. People smiled awkwardly, the polite smile people give when they're not sure if something was meant to be funny. Someone gave a small chuckle. Someone else quickly looked at their drink. And Michael stood there holding his glass, feeling as if something had just hit him in the chest. Because the joke wasn't just a joke. It was the exact opposite of the truth. He had been the one quietly stabilizing things. He had been the one protecting her family's problems from becoming a public scandal. He had been the one absorbing the stress so that Emily could stand comfortably at events like this. And now she was using him as the punchline. Michael said he forced a small smile and took a sip of his drink just to keep his hands steady. He waited for Emily to glance at him. Just once, so he could see if she realized what she had done. But she didn't. She simply turned back to the group and continued talking as if nothing unusual had happened. Michael told me something important about that moment. That single comment didn't end the marriage immediately, but it ended something inside him. Because betrayal doesn't always look like cheating. Sometimes betrayal is much quieter. Sometimes it's the moment the person you protected decides that your dignity is a fair price to pay for protecting their image. Here is part 4 modified to stay consistent with the previous parts, where you are narrating Michael's story, keeping the same modern, realistic, documentary-style tone. Michael told me that on the drive home that night, he barely spoke. Not because he was trying to be dramatic, but because he didn't trust himself to speak. He said he knew that if he opened his mouth too soon, something raw would come out, something that could turn the quiet car ride into a full argument. And strangely, even after what had happened, part of him still wanted to protect Emily. He admitted to me that this was probably the hardest part to explain. Even after being embarrassed in public, that instinct was still there, the instinct to keep the peace, to keep things contained. Emily, however, behaved as if the evening had gone perfectly well. She talked about the event, about her boss, about the colleagues who had attended. At one point she even told him, almost cheerfully, "You did great tonight. Everyone liked you." Michael said it made him feel less like a partner and more like a prop that had successfully played its role. When they got home, Emily kicked off her shoes in the hallway and began removing the pins from her hair while standing in front of the mirror. Michael remained near the kitchen doorway, still wearing his jacket, keys in his hand. That's when he finally asked her something. "Why did you say that about me?" Emily paused for a second and looked at him in the mirror. "Say what?" "At the event," he replied. "About me not handling anything. About you doing everything. About me living in a box if you left." She sighed. But according to Michael, it wasn't the kind of sigh that comes with regret. It sounded more like irritation. "It was banter," she said. "Don't start." Michael told me that word stayed with him. "Banter." He repeated it quietly. "That was embarrassing." Emily rolled her eyes slightly. "You're overthinking it," she said. "People joke like that. It makes us look normal." When Michael told me that part, he paused. Because in that moment, he realized something important. She had said the quiet part out loud. It makes us look normal. To Emily, the story people believed about them mattered more than the truth itself. Michael stepped closer and asked her something directly. "So you made me look useless so you could look, what? Capable? In control?" She looked at him for a moment, and he said he could almost see her thinking, calculating what to say next. Finally she answered. "I'm under pressure," she said, her voice becoming firmer. "I can't have people thinking I've got problems right now." Michael admitted he laughed then, but not in a happy way. "And I'm not under pressure?" he asked. That question finally got her attention. "What's that supposed to mean?" she said. For the first time in years, Michael said he felt himself standing right on the edge of the secret he had promised to protect. And for the first time, he considered the possibility that he didn't have to carry it alone anymore. "I've been holding your life together quietly," he told her. "I've been carrying stress that isn't even mine. I've kept my mouth shut for you. And tonight you made me look like a joke." Emily crossed her arms. "I didn't ask you to do all that." Michael told me that sentence hit him harder than the joke at the event. Because it rewrote the entire story. It turned his loyalty into something voluntary, something unnecessary. As if the promises they had made to each other meant nothing. "Yes, you did," he replied. "You asked me to promise." Emily shrugged slightly. "I asked you to support me," she said. "I didn't ask you to turn yourself into a martyr." Michael said that word stuck with him. Martyr. As if protecting your spouse was some kind of performance. As if loyalty was just ego disguised as sacrifice. And in that moment, something inside him went quiet. Not angry. Just clear. So he asked her one simple question. "Tell me the truth. Are we still paying for your family's situation?" Emily hesitated. And Michael said the hesitation told him everything. She looked away before answering. "It's complicated." He nodded slowly. "So that's a yes." Emily's tone sharpened. "Don't do that." Don't corner me. I'm your husband, he said. I'm already involved. I just want to know what my life actually looks like. Then she said something that made his chest tighten. If you start asking too many questions, she said quietly, you'll make things worse. Michael told me that word, worse, didn't sound like a complaint. It sounded like a warning. It reminded him that the secret Emily had told him wasn't just messy family drama. It carried consequences. It carried leverage. And it explained why she had needed his silence so badly in the first place. He admitted that the old version of himself probably would have stopped there. The loyal version. The one who had spent years protecting her. But that night, something had already shifted. The humiliation from the event was still burning in his mind. So he told her something he had never said before. I'm not doing this anymore, he said. I'm not going to be the bad guy in your story while I'm the one fixing things behind the scenes. Emily looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something simple. Fine. Michael said that word shocked him more than anything else that night. There was no apology. No attempt to soften the situation. Just acceptance, as if she had been waiting for him to stop playing the role he had always played. She walked past him toward the bedroom and began taking off her jewelry, placing each piece neatly on the dresser as if their conversation had already ended. Michael remained standing in the hallway, and in that quiet moment, something finally became clear to him. Emily didn't feel guilty, because she didn't see what she had done as betrayal. To her, it was management. Managing appearances. Managing pressure. Managing problems. And Michael realized something painful. In that marriage, his loyalty had stopped being love. It had become a resource. Something that could be used when she needed protection, and dismissed when she didn't. Michael told me that the days after that argument felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when two people have had a serious fight, but pretend nothing happened because life keeps moving. There's work in the morning. There are dishes to wash. Laundry to do. Responsibilities don't pause just because something in the relationship has cracked. Emily still asked him things like, do you want a brew? And Michael said he still answered, yeah, almost automatically. They talked about ordinary things. Grocery shopping. The weather. A delivery that didn't arrive. But underneath all of that normal conversation, Michael said something inside him had changed. He had started to feel like he wasn't safe in his own marriage. Not physically, emotionally, reputationally. Because when someone can humiliate you publicly and then dismiss it casually afterward, it means they don't see your dignity as something fragile or important. They see it as something they can use. And once Michael noticed that, he said he began seeing other things too. Little details he had ignored for years. The way Emily would sometimes correct his stories in front of other people, even when the details didn't matter. The way she would interrupt with, no, that's not what happened, as if he couldn't be trusted to explain something properly. The way she occasionally turned private moments into funny stories that always seemed to leave him looking slightly foolish. For years, Michael had brushed those things off. It wasn't worth starting an argument over something small. But now he realized those moments weren't random. They were a pattern. He also began noticing how tense Emily became whenever her family was involved. She would suddenly become distant, focused, almost businesslike. Sometimes she would step outside for long walks that Michael suspected were really phone calls. Other times, she would examine letters carefully before opening them, even glancing toward the windows first, as if she didn't want anyone outside seeing the names printed on the envelopes. One evening, Michael came home earlier than usual. He told me he wasn't trying to catch her doing anything. Work had simply ended sooner than expected, and he thought it might be a good opportunity for them to spend a quiet evening together, cook something simple, talk, maybe reset the tension between them. But the moment he walked through the front door, something felt wrong. The house was quiet. Not the calm kind of quiet. The tense kind. The kind of silence that tells you someone has recently been crying or arguing. Emily's handbag sat open on a chair. Her phone was face down on the table. And in the kitchen, she stood with her back to the doorway, holding an envelope in her hand. Michael said she jumped slightly when he said her name. What's that? He asked. Nothing. She replied quickly, already trying to fold the envelope closed. Michael stepped closer. Don't do that, he said. Just tell me. Emily shook her head. It's not for you. Michael told me that sentence stayed with him. Not for you. Inside their home. Inside their marriage. He reached out and gently took the envelope. Not aggressively, just enough to look at the front. The name on it belonged to Emily's brother. Underneath, it was the name of a company Michael didn't recognize. But he said it looked like one of those companies with neutral, harmless-sounding names that usually turn out to deal with debt collection or financial recovery. Michael felt his chest tighten. What is this? He asked. Emily tried to grab the envelope back. Give it to me. Tell me what it is. Her expression changed instantly. Stop acting like you're my dad. Michael kept his voice calm. I'm acting like your husband. If this is about debt, it affects both of us. Emily went very still, and then something unexpected happened. Her entire tone softened. She stepped closer, gently taking his hands in hers. "Please," she said quietly. "Just trust me. I'm handling it." When Michael described that moment, he said it made him feel uneasy, not comforted, because he could feel the shift. The same shift he had seen at the work event. The same shift he had seen whenever she needed to control a situation. That softer, kinder version of herself appearing exactly when she needed something from him. Michael slowly pulled his hands away. "No," he said calmly. "You don't get to say trust me anymore. Not after what happened." Emily's expression hardened again immediately. "So now you're going to punish me forever because of one comment?" Michael repeated her words quietly. "One comment. That's what you think this is?" She threw her hands up in frustration. "What do you want from me?" she said. "Do you want me to grovel? I'm trying to keep us afloat." And then she said something that made everything suddenly make more sense to Michael. "I had to say it," she snapped. "People notice things. If they think I'm struggling, they talk. And if it gets back to them, everything falls apart." Michael focused on one word she used. Them. Not just her family. Someone else. The part of the story Emily had never fully explained. His throat went dry. "Who is them?" he asked. Emily froze. Not just surprised, completely frozen. Michael said that reaction told him everything. This wasn't just about family debt. There was something else behind it. Something bigger. He asked again, more quietly this time. "Who is them?" Emily whispered something under her breath, sounding almost angry with herself. "You don't understand what you're getting involved in." Michael felt a knot form in his stomach. "Have you been threatened?" he asked. She didn't answer, and the silence said more than words could have. Michael looked at her carefully. "Have you been threatened?" he asked. "Or are you hiding something that could destroy you?" Her jaw tightened. "Drop it." But Michael said that in that moment something inside him shifted completely. The panic was gone. He felt strangely calm. "I'm not dropping it," he told her. "I'm done being the loyal idiot who protects you while you protect everyone else." Emily stared at him like he was someone she didn't recognize anymore. Like he had broken an unspoken rule. The rule that said he would stay quiet, and she would stay in control. Michael picked up his phone. "I'm going to look at our accounts tonight," he said. "All of them. If I find anything else you've hidden, I'm not covering for it anymore." Emily stepped toward him quickly. "If you do that," she said sharply, "you'll ruin us." Michael met her eyes. "No," he said. "If I do that, I'll finally know what's real." And in that moment, Michael told me something became very clear to him. Emily wasn't afraid of losing him. She was afraid of losing the version of him that protected her secrets. The version that stayed loyal no matter what. And once he understood that, he realized something important. The public humiliation at that work event hadn't been the end of the story. It was the moment the truth finally started to surface. Michael told me that night he didn't go to bed when Emily did. Instead, he stayed at the dining table with his laptop open and a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. He said he kept forgetting to drink it. Not because he was distracted in the usual way, but because his mind was somewhere else entirely. And he was careful about what he was doing. He didn't go through things like an angry detective throwing open drawers and trying to catch someone in the act. He did it quietly, slowly, almost reluctantly, as if he were the one crossing a line. That's how deeply the dynamic between them had shaped him. Even in that moment, he felt like he owed her privacy, despite everything he had learned. He logged into their shared banking first, then the accounts Emily had shown him after her first confession. He started looking through statements, searching names, checking transfers, trying to understand the pattern. At first, he only saw what he already knew about, small transfers to her family, payments that appeared under different references so they wouldn't immediately stand out as connected. But then he found something else, a second layer, regular payments going to an account that didn't belong to her mother or her brother. The name didn't match anyone in the family. It looked like the name of a service, something deliberately neutral. What caught Michael's attention wasn't the size of the payments. It was the pattern. They were consistent. Monthly. Like a subscription. He went back further through the statements. And that's when he realized something unsettling. The payments had started earlier than Emily had ever admitted. Before their marriage. Before some of the things she had claimed were the beginning of the problem. Michael told me that when he realized that, his hands actually felt cold. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the screen. Because suddenly it felt like he was looking at a life he thought he understood, but didn't. Eventually he did what most people do when they're afraid of the answer, but can't stop themselves. He searched the name online. And the result made his stomach drop. The account was connected to a private arrangement that Emily's family had been involved in for years. It wasn't just debt. It wasn't simply helping someone financially. It was a way of keeping someone quiet. A private agreement designed to make sure certain stories stayed buried. Stories that could damage reputations, careers, relationships. The kind of complicated family situation people pretend doesn't exist until it explodes publicly. But what shocked Michael most was realizing that the arrangement wasn't just about protecting someone else in the family. It was protecting Emily. The something else she had hinted at earlier wasn't just pressure from her relatives. It was something she had been personally involved in years ago. A decision she had made that she never wanted anyone to connect back to her. Something that, if revealed, would cause people to question the carefully maintained image she presented to the world. The responsible, composed, respectable version of herself. Michael told me that he sat there in the dark for a long time after realizing that. And what he felt first wasn't anger. It was grief. Grief for the years he had spent defending someone who hadn't told him the full truth. Suddenly the work event made sense. Emily hadn't humiliated him because she thought it was funny. She had done it because she needed witnesses to see a specific version of their relationship. A version where she looked capable and in control, and Michael looked harmless and slightly incompetent. If rumors ever surfaced, if whispers ever started, people would already have a narrative ready in their minds. They would think, it couldn't be her. She's the one holding everything together. He's the one who's a bit lost. Michael said that realization hurt more than anything else. Because by protecting her secret for so long, he hadn't only protected her. He had trapped himself. If the truth ever came out, people would ask him the same question. How did you not know? And suddenly it would look like he had been part of it. Like he had accepted it. Like he had chosen it. Eventually, he closed the laptop. The house was silent except for the occasional creak in the floorboards. And he sat there thinking about every moment he had defended Emily. Every time he had told friends and family that she was just stressed. Every time he had said she meant well. Every time he had explained away behavior that didn't make sense. His loyalty had been expensive. The next morning was a Saturday. Emily suggested they go out for breakfast. Michael said she behaved as if everything between them was completely normal. They sat across from each other while she calmly buttered her toast. Halfway through the meal, she said lightly, "You've been a bit quiet lately. Are you still upset about the other night?" Michael placed his cutlery down carefully. "I stayed up last night," he said. "I looked through everything." He said the color drained from her face almost immediately. "I know about the account," he continued. "The monthly payments. I know it's been happening longer than you told me. And I know it's not just about helping your family." Emily stared at him. Michael said he could practically see her mind working, deciding which reaction might work best. Deny, cry, get angry, charm him, threaten him. In the end, she chose anger. "You went through my accounts?" she said sharply, lowering her voice so people at nearby tables wouldn't hear. "That's disgusting." Michael admitted he almost laughed at that. "I'm your husband," he replied calmly. "You made my life part of this. You don't get to call me disgusting for trying to understand why." Emily's eyes filled with tears. But this time he didn't trust them. "You don't understand," she said. "If you start pulling on this, everything will fall apart." "Good," Michael said quietly. "Because I'm done living in a lie." Emily leaned forward. "If you expose this," she said coldly, "you'll destroy my life." Michael noticed something important about that sentence. She didn't say our life. She said my life. And in that moment, he realized something with surprising clarity. For years he had been carrying someone who would never carry him the same way. "So what?" she asked him. "You're going to leave?" Michael told me he didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because the decision felt like stepping out of a house that had once been his home, even if he now understood that the foundations were rotten. Finally he said, "I'm done covering for you. I'm not going to be your shield anymore." For the first time, he said he saw real fear in Emily's eyes. Not fear of losing love. Fear of losing protection. She reached across the table. "Please," she said softly. "We can fix this. You love me." Michael looked down at her hand, and he thought about all the years he had spent being loyal. About how loyalty is supposed to go both ways. About how marriage is supposed to be two people protecting each other, not one person managing the other. "I did love you," he said quietly. "But you used it." Emily's expression changed. Then she stood up suddenly, scraping her chair loudly across the floor. Her voice rose just enough for nearby tables to hear. "Unbelievable," she said. "So you're doing this here? You're humiliating me." Michael told me that moment felt strangely familiar. The same tactic she had used at the work event. The same performance. The same attempt to control the narrative with witnesses. People in the cafe looked over. Strangers who knew nothing about them, but could easily believe whatever story they saw unfold. And suddenly Michael understood something. Emily had been practicing this kind of control for years. Testing how easily reality could be bent. Testing how quickly people would accept a version of events that made her look like the victim. He stood up calmly, paid at the counter, and walked out without raising his voice. Not because he felt defeated, but because he refused to play a role in her performance anymore. Outside, the air felt cold and clear. Michael said he stood there on the pavement for a moment and felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Relief. Because the secret he had carried for her had cost him his peace, his dignity, even his sense of who he was. And the moment she betrayed him publicly, something broke. The illusion. He stopped being her shield. And for the first time in years, he started becoming himself again. Michael told me he didn't leave that situation with all the answers. Healing didn't happen overnight. But he left with the truth. And sometimes, the truth is the first real breath you take after years of holding it in. And if there's one thing he said he wishes someone had told him earlier, it's this. Loyalty isn't love when it only flows one way. Keeping someone's secret isn't noble if it's destroying you. And if someone can turn you into the joke in public while you're protecting them in private, they were never your partner. They were your responsibility. And the moment you stop carrying them is the moment you finally start living again.